Konnichiwa or Konbanwa, depending on what time of day you're catching us. This is the Community Solutions Minnesota radio podcast. I am Jason Bradley, and as always, my partner in crime, Andrew Richter's here with me.
How you doing, Jay?
Fantastic. It is a good day.
It's always a sunny day in my world.
Yes. And that's a state of mind is what it is. It's not just a pipe dream.
Absolutely, it has to be.
Yes, absolutely. Well, today we've got a great show for you. We talk every now and again about city commissions and how important it is to be on one. Well, we're going to just dig in on city commissions today. We're going to tell you a little bit about what they are, some of the different commissions that there might be, and why it is important that we get people out to fill up these vacancies. Because, take the hometown of Crystal right now. There are 6 vacancies on the Environmental Quality Commission, which is just amazing to me.
Yeah, they go through people. I don't really know. I have my theories on why, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, there's probably vacancies in pretty much any commission anywhere. Maybe something like the planning or the park board wouldn't have as much, but anytime you're looking to serve or anytime you need an outlet for something, this is the perfect place to start.
Absolutely. This is really ground floor. This is your entry-level position into politics.
Right. Or, it's the same thing in partisan politics. Where do you start as? You start by attending a caucus. You start by being an election judge. You start by being a convener. You start by being a delegate. You work your way up. Maybe you don't start as a delegate, but you work your way up. That's what I did. That's what you did. And you slowly get to learn. You get to know people, and you get to know city staff. You get to know how government works. You get to know the city council. You get to know the procedures for permits and zoning, and you'll learn on the park board. You'll learn about all the funds that they have, and there's grants, and there's other kinds of things that you may not know or have heard about. And if you're thinking about doing something, if you're one of those, especially younger folks, because too often I think these get filled up by people who've are more older. And I think we need to get younger folks who are going to live in the city for 15, 20, raise their kids there. They have just as much of a vested interest, if not more so.
Right, and it should be a good mix of men and women and just whoever lives in the community. It should be, you talk about having equality in politics. And people we need to elect more women, we need to elect more minorities. Well, this is really where it starts, because these committees, these commissions, they advise the city council or the county commissions on the things that they're going to vote on. And so it's really where you can learn about this stuff before you ever would have to vote on it sitting on a council.
Right. And you mentioned things like women and minorities. It's critical that folks like that volunteer to be on these things. When I was on the city code task force, when I was the chair of that, we didn't have a single minority on that. I don't think so, anyway, none that I can think of. And I don't think we had one on the planning commission either. When I served, there was 9 people, and I think we had 1 woman. And it's just too bad. I mean, it's too bad that in a city of 23,000.
Right, and a lot of times, though, I mean, it's not that the city council is choosing white males. No. It's just sometimes it's who applies.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. And here's the thing: you're not going to change the makeup of a city council until you change the makeup of the things below that. It's kind of like getting minority coaches in the NFL. Well, if they're not getting college jobs and they're not getting
assistant coaching
jobs, they're not going to get ahead. They're not qualified. So I think I think it's a good point, because I hear that a lot, especially with demographics changing very slowly, but over generations. But it is happening in these first, second, third ring suburbs where it's gone from being, say, when I grew up in Crystal, it was probably 90% white folks. Now it's about 79. And in the next generation, I mean, I'm talking 20 years from now,
Yeah.
it may be 65.
Right.
But if, those folks aren't, and I see it the same thing in our like the groups like the Crystal Lions and groups like Beyond the Yellow Ribbon. I mean, minority participation is pretty much non-existent.
Right.
And I see a lot of complaining about it, but I don't see a lot of action being taken. And unfortunately, it starts with somebody volunteering. The city council can do all the outreach they want. If there's not a hand to reach back,
Right.
it's meaningless.
And this is the thing. I mean, before...
I think it's home ownership, too. I should just mention that.
Okay.
Is another issue, because I think minorities are more likely to be renters. They're more likely to be mobile, which may be a problem, too. If you don't put down roots in a city,
Right.
it's unlikely that you're going to see those people serve. And that's not a knock on them. It's just
Right.
a statement of fact.
Right. And, and in fact, by taking ownership in your community, it might cause people to put down roots, and whether that's long-term renting or buying a home, once you invest into a community, I mean, tell me, was it hard for you to leave Crystal for Champlin?
Yes, absolutely it was. It was heart-wrenching. I mean, I still miss the city.
Yeah.
I miss it all the time.
Exactly.
I drive through it, and I feel like getting out and walking around. I just want to sit down and eat at Chipotle or something just because I'm eating at Crystal.
Yeah,
It's hard, So, you put down roots and it's hard to pick up and leave. Your heart is still somewhere. So,
and I would say the same thing about my days, growing up in Duluth and Proctor. I did a lot of volunteering, when I was going through Scouts on my way to Eagle Scout and through being involved in my church and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard. You put work into a community and then you have to up and leave. It's difficult. So I think that being in a commission really is valuable in that aspect as well. So why don't we take a look here at what some of these commissions are? First of all, maybe in a general sense, let's talk about what commissions are, what they do, without getting into the nitty-gritty of the specific type of commissions.
Okay. Well, I'll just start with commissions advise city councils.
Right.
Without getting into, we'll get into the specific ones later, but basically an issue comes before a commission. Now, be it zoning, be it parks, be it human rights, be it an environmental issue, be it a charter issue if you have a city charter. And they basically, the city council asks for advice on, gets an independent group to look at something. Granted, they're appointed by the council, but it's really not. I got appointed to the planning commission by a council that majority of people there didn't really agree with me or like me that much. So it's not that they just put their friends there. That's really not what commissions are. And we, as a commission, they listen. Often staff will put together a packet for them, just like you're on the city council.
Right.
And you read that and go through that. They might have a recommendation. They might not. They might just say, look, here's the evidence. You debate it. And then they will debate what to do. And then they will send a recommendation to the city council. Now, every commission works a little different. So it's not, I'm giving you a real general way of how that would work.
Yeah.
Some commissions, depending on the city, will take the initiative a little more than in some. A lot of them do meet, at least the chair and the vice chair will periodically meet with the council and discuss where they are and what they're doing and what issues they want to tackle. And the council will often, in most cities, they'll appoint what's called a liaison. That council person will work with that commission, attend the meetings. They're kind of like the point person. They're kind of the bridge between the full council and the commission. And so you'll do something that way. But basically it's an advisory board. And you get to know a lot of things about the city, about your parks, about your zoning, about your housing, about where water, water and sewer, because that's an issue that would be dealt with. charter. You get to learn basically from the ground up, and you get to work with city staff, usually the city planner or community development person. You work with the city manager almost always. Your public works and park and rec director would be people that would be involved. Basically, the top 6 head honchos,
Right.
maybe with the exception of the finance person, because finance is something that the council has to decide.
Right.
So that's a board doesn't have the power to fine somebody or tax somebody or make somebody pay a fee. That's all done with city code or by the council. But basically, it's giving the city council a recommendation on a particular subject and or issue. And we can go into that a little more specifically, but that's sort of your role. And in most councils, I know in Crystal, I'll just do Crystal. I could talk about Champlin too. Crystal, they have it based on wards.
Yes.
And then also there may be 1 or 2 at-larges because you have to have an odd number. And we have 4 wards. So like when I was on the planning commission, we did 2 people for each ward. I was one of the ward 4. And then we had one, Michelle Strand, she was at-large to give us an odd number. And they were we were appointed for 3-year terms. I was appointed to fill a vacancy that was there. So you may have to reappoint quicker because of that. But most of them do. And I know Champlin does it very similar to that because there's a vacancy in Ward 3 where I happen to be. Because my commissioner, Nate Truesdale, he got elected to the council. Perfect example of somebody who started there, and he was on the commission for 3 years, and then went up to city council. Jeff Kolb, who I served with, he was the Ward 2 planning commission when he and I served together. So it is an entree to Nancy LaRoche is another one. It is an entree to going up. If you, and it may be a place to start seeing if you want to do this or not, because you'll have things like open forum where people will come and they'll tell you good or bad on something. I had to deal with some of that as on the planning commission in particular.
Oh, I'm sure.
We're talking about, and I can give examples later, but we're talking about changing zoning or changing a conditional use permit kind of thing, which will affect an entire neighborhood potentially.
Right.
So that's in a nutshell, the long version, I guess, of what a commission does.
So when you're talking about the numbers and people coming from certain wards being versus being at large, and then you talk about there being like a commission chair. Is the chair usually a city staff person? And if so, are they chosen from the wards, or are they someone over and above? Do they have a decision then?
No, the chair is a member.
Okay.
They are chosen by the council, by the commission.
Okay.
When I was on the city code task force, I was the chair, and I was elected as the chair by everybody.
Right.
And we elected once a year. Usually your first meeting every year. When I was on the planning commission, our meeting in January, it's the same like the council. The council will select a mayor pro temp, which is Julie. She's the mayor pro temp. They'll select, and the commission will have 3 officers. We have a secretary, who's basically the note taker and does the minutes. We have the vice chair, who is the chair if the chair's not there.
Right.
And then the chairman, who basically runs the meeting. They don't have they don't have more power.
Right. It's like the mayor of the council.
Right. But they're there to facilitate the discussion, keep it one person talking at a time. When there's an open forum, somebody acts just like Jim does.
Yeah.
It's really not a huge role. They also sit in on interviews with, like when I did my planning commission, there was Dick Van Ruden, who was I don't know if he still is, the chair of the planning commission, but he sat in with Mayor Adams, and at the time Casey was the liaison of the planning commission. He sat in on the interviews that we did. So that's another function maybe that the chair may have. They may have some influence there. Ultimately, though, it's the council who does all the appointing.
Right.
So, but that's the role. If you get elected to an officer, it's not you're not expected to put in 80 hours a week. It's-
Right. And that's a great point. I mean, most of these commissions meet once a month for 2 to 3 hours, maybe, right? And some of them might only meet once every 6 months. I mean, this isn't a huge time commitment.
It depends. There's 2 required meetings a year.
Right.
And for the most part, they meet every month. The Charter Commission in Crystal is the one exception.
Right.
They only have to meet twice. They can meet more.
Right.
Depending
if
on...
there's an issue they need to get to the bottom of,
or
yeah.
the council wants them to discuss an issue. But they have to... And that has happened. I mean, it happened with ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
It happened with... They had a discussion... I remember when I was running for mayor, they had a discussion about the 2 extra council seats. And they decided to keep them at the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to attend one of the meetings that they talked about it. But they did facilitate an interesting discussion, even though they didn't make any changes.
Right.
They got the history, and because I wasn't at this meeting, I'm not 100%. I'm getting this secondhand.
Yeah.
But they went over the history of why Crystal has 7 instead of 5. So I don't know the reasoning, but I know they looked into it.
Yeah.
Changing that would require a charter change, which is a lot different. To a city council, they would have to pass it with a supermajority to change the charter. So it's not so. It's like a constitutional amendment. It's not so simple,
Right.
And it shouldn't be. It should be.
It should be hard.
Right.
Yeah.
It's our Constitution.
Right.
It shouldn't be easy to change. So that's kind of the snag in making a big change like that. That'd be a big change. So, but they're the only commission that I know of that does not, in Crystal anyway, that does not meet monthly.
Okay.
So yeah, it'd be the same, third Monday or Thursday or whatever. So you'll know when they all are.
Yeah. So if you're looking to get involved in local politics, I mean, this is a great point to jump in. And like Andrew said, it might be that you're looking eventually at running for office someday. Maybe you're not. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you have no idea what you want to do, but you want to be involved. You jump in, you get on a commission, and you're serving your community. And you know what? You may never want to run for office, but it's still a really noble way to step up and serve your community.
And trust me, I'll tell you this much. Whether you ever run for something or not, you will be a point person. Believe me, I mean, when I was on the Planning Commission and the City Code Task Force, I had people coming up to me, asking me how it was going, asking me what was going on over here and over there.
Yeah.
I represented Ward 4. I wasn't the city council person, but I was still a representative from that area, and I took it very seriously. And, people will, I saw something was to whatever happened with this, you get to meet people that way. You get to meet people who are serving with you. Like I said, you get to know the city staff. You get to know the process. You kind of make a name for yourself while you're serving. So if you have ambitions or even thinking about it, like you said, this is the perfect place to get a start.
I think it's a must. I mean, if you're looking at running for city council, can you get a city council seat without serving on one of these commissions? Yes, but you're going to walk in more uninformed and trying to play catch up than if you had actually served on one of these commissions. You're only doing yourself a favor by serving on one.
No doubt about it.
Let's talk a little bit about how these... Maybe we can go into some of the specific commissions. These things are not just at city council level. They're also in our school districts. They're also in our counties. There are some at state level that you can step into. But again, I mean, sometimes we get these starry eyes, and it's like, I want to serve on a commission that deals with state issues, and it's like, well, why don't we start locally?
Here's the thing, too.
Yeah,
you're not going to get appointed to a state thing straight out of the.
No.
If you're a wide-eyed 28-year-old, they're not going to appoint you.
No, they're going to take city council members. They're going to take
former members.
Yeah.
Former people who've served, who used to serve on a county level. That's who they're looking for to move up to the state naturally. It's like being a state rep. What's a good qualification? Being a mayor.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is. That's what voters look for.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there are these things on every level. They are a little bit different depending on where you live and what county you have, what issues might be. And there are some things that are required by the state government. For example, just take your average city.
Okay.
The Planning Commission is actually there by state statute.
Yes.
Pretty much every city north of a couple hundred people has a planning commission. It is in state statute. A park board is pretty much on every single. It's hard to think. It may be on a county if the county doesn't have a lot of big cities. But pretty much you're going to find a park board everywhere. Then after that, if you're a charter city,
Right.
you pretty much will almost always have a charter commission. I can't think of any cities I've run into that weren't home rule charter.
No, I think you have to, because
I'm pretty sure by state statute you have to have.
in order to, talk about and consider
charter.
issues with your charter, you have to have a commission to be able to look at that. Now, does that look different from city to city? I mean, I'm sure it does.
Absolutely.
Where it might have a greater or lesser makeup of council members, that kind of stuff.
And every charter is different too.
Yeah.
So it's, and then you may have other commissions too. You may have a human rights board. What they do is sort of the history of human rights commissions was born out of civil rights in the 60s.
Right.
And they were there to advise on issues between, say, maybe a police force and a incident involving civil rights or something like that. They kind of served as a mediator. Human rights boards from that point on have evolved into something different, and there's pros and cons to that. I don't like a commission that does whatever they want to and kind of. I think one of the problems that we see with human rights commissions is that they're not really, because what they are doing, and there's a state human rights, I should say that's one of the ones you will see on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
And you may see parks will be another one you see on other levels too, because there's counties and there's state parks and there's a lot of different things. But since human rights commissions have evolved or gone off the rails from what they originally were due, they often take up politically charged issues on their own,
Right.
which I think is not really what they're supposed to be doing. That's just my opinion. I don't like it when city commissions and city governments try to take stands on national issues. That's not their role. It's something I really complained about and I think our old city council was partly at fault for this, because I think they were encouraging it.
Yeah.
Back in 2012, you might remember when I was running for mayor that the Human Rights Commission, the city council got together and passed a resolution opposing the marriage amendment. I don't see marriage as a human rights issue. To me,
Right.
human rights issue is everybody having water or a shirt to wear. I mean, it's really not their role to take a political stand on something.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's the direction these have gone. Again, there's an absence of leadership from the council. There's a commission looking for something to do because they're not being given something to do, so they do it themselves.
Well, and that's a good idea, or a good thing to mention, because what was the deal? Was it a couple of years ago? I mean, the commission just took something up on their own. There's a whole deal with genocide.
Yeah.
You had written an article about that.
I wrote several.
Yeah.
Basically, April
Yeah.
in the state of Minnesota is Genocide Awareness Month. I guess we're not aware of genocides the other 11 months out of the year. And I raised an issue. We have a Senator, Sandy Pappas, who I think is really involved in a conflict of interest with this, because she's on the board of this genocide awareness group, which as a sitting senator is really out of bounds ethically.
Yeah.
I mean, if a Republican were sitting on a pro-life group, it would be a big story. And I sort of picked up on the main speaker that they had, who was trying to make a connection between genocide and climate change.
Yes.
And after I got done laughing, basically, it's hard to put it all in a minute here, but basically the Human Rights Commission, and I was unaware of this, actually was given a budget. He actually paid this lady to come and speak, and all about how capitalism is the cause, and we're not doing enough to prevent this. And it's like, my attitude is, you want to fight genocide, why don't you go talk to the people who are, why are you talking to me? Why don't you go talk to the people who are killing people? It's not us. What does that have to do with City of Crystal?
Right.
And nobody could give me and look, I took some flack for it, but my answer was just, this commission clearly has nothing to do. Okay? Can I just say that
That's
out
the
loud?
point, yeah.
I mean, they're fishing. And you should have seen their agenda. Their agendas on their meeting before this was to talk about genocide awareness, talk about the meeting. Their agendas for the couple of months afterward, talk about what happened, talk about it was all centered around there was nobody there with a fresh outlook on what this commission should be doing and shouldn't be doing. I just thought it was, to be honest, it was a waste of our time.
Right.
And that was my whole point. And I think people didn't realize who this lady was. I said, do you know who you're booking for this? And, do you know what she's going around saying? And, it was disappointing to see something like that. And that's, again, now that the Human Rights Commission, it's a big part, I think, why they don't exist anymore.
Right.
In Crystal. So that can happen. Environmental quality is another. They might be called something different in another city. I've seen it called different things, but is also a commission that one of the things that they do. I'm going to give a little comparison to Crystal and New Hope here. New Hope is not a charter city.
Right, that's a statutory city.
So they have a planning commission, a park board, a human rights commission, and what's called a citizens advisory commission.
Right.
Which is an interesting idea. What they do is they're just a standing commission. We have this too in Crystal with the employee review board.
Right.
Which really doesn't function as anything now because things aren't mediated like that anymore, but it's required in our charter, which makes it difficult to change. We went through this with the City Code Task Force. Changing that in the charter, the language is difficult. But that Citizens Advisory Board takes on any issue that the city wants to put forward. And, I could name off some issues, whether that's an environmental issue, whether it's garbage collection, which is an issue a lot of cities have debated, whether that's a city code thing. So it's an interesting idea. New Hope just does it a little differently than Crystal does. Environmental quality is one of those commissions where I think also lacks direction and lacks sort of in Crystal, it's been a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going to put it bluntly. I think they've had.
Oh, absolutely.
I think since 2010, they've had over like 40 or 50 members. I mean, I don't know how anybody looks at a commission like that and thinks it's succeeding. But maybe certain former mayors we know. But it's just kind of mind-boggling. So but you may have something like that. It may wander off on its own. It may have a very specific purpose. It sort of depends on the city council. So
yeah.
But the Planning Commission and the Park Board, you'll see everywhere without a doubt.
Right.
No question about it.
And there are some other commissions, and we're not going to get deep into these today, but we're going to, I think, have some future podcasts to talk about things like the EDA, the Economic Development Association, watershed commissions.
Right, and keep in mind, an EDA is not an advisory board.
Right.
They have, actually that's the council, but somebody else gets the gavel.
Right.
They have the power of money. They have a separate levy that they get. So that is kind of a quasi... it's just another arm of the council is kind of how I would describe that.
Me too.
And at the county level, that would be called an HRA, Housing and Redevelopment Authority. It's a little bit different. But again, it's made up of the same people who.
It's basically a side council that can take our tax dollars to buy property.
Yeah, I mean
which is terrible.
Yeah, and ultimately, TIF often will get discussed there, which we'll discuss on a different show. But tax increment financing, which is another government scam.
Yeah.
So you'll see. I mean, here's my advice to people: if you have an interest. That's where you have to go. I mean, for me, my interest was charter planning.
Yeah.
Not that I don't care about the parks, but that's not where my heart is.
Right.
So that's the direction I went.
Yeah, and if the environment is more your thing, I mean, the parks is a good one, and I would say even better than like environmental quality. Like if you have a creek or a river that runs through your city, getting on a watershed commission would be a better way to go because you can manage a specific thing.
And those are much bigger, too. If you look at the two that run through Crystal, for example.
Right, Bassett Creek and Shingle Creek.
Right. And you've got, and by the way, they have a tax levy. Check out your statement in November. You'll see it. But the Bassett Creek one, actually, I think about half a dozen cities are on that board. And they do have citizen boards.
Yeah.
I mean, citizen spots. They'll have a council spot. It is kind of a mix of the two. And because I think Bassett Creek, goes from Minneapolis to Plymouth. That goes into Medicine Lake. And through Crystal, Golden Valley, New Hope. It's a really big one. Shingle Creek actually is too.
Yeah.
Because of Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and Minneapolis, and Crystal. So I think it goes through all of those. But those are big things to get on too. I mean, and the issues only get bigger because of the runoff, because of the salt, because of the water quality running into Medicine Lake. If you have a passion for that, that could also be a very good avenue. There's not a lot of openings, but there's also a lot of people who don't want to step up and do it.
Right. I don't know. Is there one for the Mississippi River that involves Champlin, Coon Rapids, Minneapolis?
I don't think it's a watershed. I think the river is governed by something bigger than that.
Okay.
But we do have the Elm Creek over in Maple Grove, that has its own. That is right on the border of Maple Grove and Champlin and Dayton and that area. And I'm pretty sure they have their own.
Yeah. And
that runs up to the Mississippi and I think to the Rum as well.
And there's one down here in St. Louis Park, too. I know
Minnehaha
has one. Yeah.
Yeah, so those watersheds are. You have any kind of creek running from one place to another in particular because that's how the water gets intertwined. There'll be some sort of, and again, they may call it something different.
Right.
Minneapolis, for example, has their own. They have their own board that just deals with I can't remember what it's called, but they have their own sort of board that just deals with their stuff in addition to the ones because they have Lake Calhoun, like the Isles, and so on as Nokomis,
Harriet,
yeah. So theirs is like a 16-member one.
Wow.
They have 16 wards, and I think they have an at-large or something like that.
Wow.
So they have quite a large one. And they have, I don't want to say quite a bit of authority. That's the wrong way to put it. I think their job is just a little bit bigger than your average, 15,000 city suburb or whatever.
And kind of akin to that, you have in some cities where they have joint services, like between Crystal and New Hope, they share the West Metro Fire, and there's a board that governs that.
We have that in Champlin. Champlin and Anoka have a city shared service as well among their fire department, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but.
Now, how some of those operate vary from city to city.
It's all in a joint powers agreement.
Right.
That's what you have to look at.
West Metro had two spots for citizens to advise, and then, three. And then the councils decided, we're just going to appoint council people to those positions. Now they backed off of that, I think, for the most part. Crystal has.
New Hope,
yeah. Yeah, New Hope still...
originally, it's still a council member. Originally, the original makeup of West Metro was one person that both councils approve
Right.
as sort of an at-large.
Right.
Then, again, according to the Joint Powers Agreement, each city manager, and then one council person from each city, and then one citizen from each city. And it's important that their role is bigger than advisory, but ultimately the city councils have to approve those actions, especially the actions that deal with a budget or deal with. I think they have to approve the fire chief as well. I don't.
Okay.
Not 100% sure on that. When Sarah Larson got appointed, I don't know that they had to go to the councils for that because the councils don't hire people.
Right.
Except city managers. So maybe
Right.
they don't. But it's kind of again, it depends on the Joint Powers Agreement. It depends on a city charter. Crystal, it lays out who's hires who.
Right.
Whereas statutory city might be run differently.
Yeah, you have to look into state statutes to figure it out.
Absolutely, you do. And a statutory B and
A, yeah.
Right, they're slightly different. And then, but like we said, if your passion is parks or planning or the environment or the city charter or whatever, always know that there's an outlet for that somewhere in your city. There's some way. Maybe your passion is veterans. Well, we have a Blue Ribbon Committee that in Crystal, it's New Hope, Robbinsdale, Golden Valley, and Crystal run their own Blue Ribbon Committee. Julie Deschler is one of the heads of it, but there's also groups like the Crystal Lions are a great group. They do volunteer work in the city and sponsor baseball teams and do things like that. So that's not affiliated with the city, but it's still another place to volunteer and kind of get to meet people and do something good.
Yeah.
I do things with the Crystal Lions, and I've never been a member.
Well, and it looks good. I mean, if you're ever going to run for city office and you're just showing up out of your mom's basement, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to get a lot of votes. I mean, if you're a charming person and, you're smart, yeah, you're going to get votes. But if you're not involved in the community at all, I mean, that's seen as a negative.
Yeah, and your first thing of city service just can't be running for office. I mean, one of the things that I did before running for office was, I did a lot of volunteer work outside of cities with the Lions, with the Crystal VFW, with Northwest Community TV. I volunteered a ton of time. Not officially with any kind of city commission. So that's another avenue you could hypothetically take if nothing like this appeals to you. Just know that when you're a council member, this is the kind of stuff you're going to have to deal with. So it'd be beneficial for you to get involved, or worst case scenario, if you want to be involved with your VFW or the Lions or somebody like
Boy
that.
Scouts, Little League Baseball. Yeah.
Attend the meeting. Attend a meeting, speak at open forum, ask a question, send an email. It's read the minutes. There's a lot of things to know what's going on. I can't tell you, when I ran for office, I thought I knew everything. I can't tell you what I've learned since then. It's astronomical, the amount of things. Yeah, I knew everything about the budget and all that, but there's a million more things to need to know on top of that. And, I don't know how specific we want to get in, but I can maybe give some quick examples. The Planning Commission, for example, what do they do? I mean, I got asked that a lot when I was there. Basically what happens, here, I'll just give you a quick example. Milton's was a very good example. Of they came to the Planning Commission and wanted to have outdoor seating. The way Louis does, the way Buffalo Wings does. They were in a zoning.
Right. Problem being, they're kind of border a residential area.
Yes, it's called neighborhood commercial.
Yes.
Where, if you know where they are on 36th and Douglas, some people listening might not know where they are, but basically there's like 3 businesses on one side, 3 businesses on the other. There's a liquor store across the street, a barbershop. And then right behind that is like somebody's house, which is a lot different than, say, a shopping center, like the Crystal Shopping Center.
Yeah.
So they're zoned differently. It's called C1 neighborhood. C2 is basically more of a shopping center. So there's a little bit more restrictions on what time they have to close and, what time they have to open.
Right.
And there had been an issue previously with the aerobics place next door.
Yep.
Because they wanted to open earlier because a lot of people like to get a workout in before they go to work.
Right.
So they got what's called a conditional use permit, which is basically an exception to the city code. And if you get a lot of exceptions to the city code, guess what? They start looking at the city code.
Yeah.
They might change that.
Yeah.
So it's important that businesses do this and say, hey, and so what happened was we had Milton's applied for that. The city sent out a mailer to all the houses around that within, I don't know, X amount of square feet. They're required by law to do that, by the way. It's hey, look, if you have an objection or anything positive or negative to say, either email us, call us, or show up at the night that Milton's was applying for this. So they came to us and said, it was not very much, but we want to do it, and we want to stay open later in the summer to accommodate this. So we made, our finding was that it was something that we were willing to do, and we recommended yes to the council to that. We did have some residents come. Nobody completely objected. Stephanie came, the police chief, and thought that they wouldn't have an issue with this, and we recommended approval, which of course ultimately it's the council that decides it.
Right.
And so they were the ones who ultimately said yes. And if it's a city code change, they have to do what's called a first and a second reading. There's two opportunities to come before something in the code can be changed.
Right.
But that's a good example of something that you might find. I typically don't like conditional use permits because why have a law if you're going to make a whole bunch of exceptions? I'd rather just change the law. But in some cases, it's a unique situation that maybe can't be thought of in advance. When Neighborhood Commercial came in, Milton's wasn't there.
Right.
So that a restaurant comes in, it's okay. Well, they have different needs and they have to make money too. So there was a difference of thinking. We also dealt with the lights that could be used on a billboard. We dealt with that. I don't know what you call it, but because the LED was coming in, and so we had some dissent on that. I voted in favor of. I voted against a conditional use permit, and I voted for changing the law that LED is brighter, it flashes more, but we set some standards to that. LED is where we're going. Yeah. And so we made, I think it was a 6-3 vote, but I voted for that. And the city council ultimately, I believe with 2 dissents, because it was the council, Jim was the mayor, but we had a little more of a hostile council. Yeah. But they ultimately did vote for it. I think it was 5-2. I think there were a couple dissenting votes that I think Budashevsky and Selton voted no, if I remember right. And Libby and Hoffman voted yes with the other 3. Okay. But we were able to get that law changed, and the city code was changed. So it was, again, it was about an hour-long debate, believe it or not. It was MD Liquor. They were the one. Oh, yeah. Because they're very new over by Wells Fargo over there. Yep. And they wanted a LED sign. Right. And that actually was not in our city code, so we had to change the code. But that's a good example of what you might come across in a planning commission.
Absolutely. And it's the same kind of stuff. Whether you're dealing with Parks and Rec, environmental quality, human rights. I mean, it's issues like that affect the way that city life happens. And so that's why it's important for you to get your hands dirty, not with bribes, but to get them dirty.
No greasy palms.
That's right. Digging in the dirt and working on behalf of your city. I before we close this down, and we'll close it down, I think, with discussing how you get on a commission, I want to share a beef that I have, though. And this is pertaining pretty much just to the secretary position on these commissions. City councils, I don't know if it's by law, I think so, but you have to make what you talk about known. You have to give plenty of prior notice when you're talking about certain things. Most cities record audio and or video of their meetings, and now that doesn't translate to work sessions, and we had squawked for a long time about the importance of having the work sessions recorded, which now they are. Now in Crystal, but with commissions, and they're all just as bad as one another. Even to go back and look at the notes, here's what we talked about. They give you topics. They might give you, the vote was 4-3, but they don't tell you any of the discussion. They don't really tell you where they landed, and that's something we have to fix. They've got to take better notes. I don't know that we need to record them just because they're not elected officials. We don't need to hold them accountable, but we need to understand what they're talking about so we can go to the council and give our 2 cents.
Yeah, and they've gotten better on that. When I was on the City Code Task Force, we recorded those meetings.
Yes.
They're available to be listened to. Also, on the when I was on the Planning Commission, they did record who voted what. There would be, because I was the dissenting vote plenty of times, and Jeff and I sometimes,
Yeah.
They did. I think they've improved on that. Golden Valley, for example, and New Hope televised their planning commission meetings now.
That's great.
Yeah, and I don't know that they always have, but I know that the past couple of years they have moved to, Golden Valley and New Hope have moved to do that. So I think it's you're right.
Yeah.
I think we're making progress on it, but especially planning is big that be zoning changes and things like that.
Yep.
That really need, and I'm with you. I like hearing the discussion. I'm one of those that likes the debate. Forget what side of the debate you're on, and you may not be on a side,
right?
But you might want to hear all points of view. I've had that issue with the Charter Commission. One of the things that they did, I remember, and it was thanks to Jim Othout mainly, who was a friend of ours. They had dealt with ranked choice voting, and they only heard one side of the story.
Yeah,
and it was Jim who squawked, and I got this secondhand from him. It's like, okay, we've heard the argument for it. Why aren't we hearing the argument against it? There's 2 sides to this.
Yeah.
And once they heard the argument against it, they didn't make a recommendation.
It's amazing how that works.
I think what happened was ranked choice voting was something being pushed by 1 or 2 of the people. And again, I respect their view, but it's not fair to only have one side of the discussion.
But that's how it usually happens, whether it's Green Step cities, whether it's, they sell their point. City staff comes and sells their point to the council, to the advisory commissions.
Sometimes it works like that, yeah. I mean, when I was in the Planning Commission, I have to compliment John Sutter, our city, actually he's now the, because Patrick retired. I can't remember what that position's called. Community development guy or something.
Community development.
I have to say, he did a very good job of being, a civil servant, of letting us discuss something. There were times he didn't say anything for half an hour and let us just talk.
That's great.
And maybe he chimed in. If we had a specific question, we would ask him. Maybe he had a recommendation. Maybe he didn't. He didn't always recommend something. And whatever he recommended isn't always what we passed. I'm just saying. I thought he did a good job of leading the discussion, but not getting what he wanted pushed. If that makes any sense, he walked that balance very, very well. And
that's great.
Yeah, I thought he. But I'm guessing there's not a John Sutter in every city who does that.
Oh no, even in Crystal, among the different commissions, there's probably not a John Sutter on each one.
Probably not. So, but I have to compliment him on and respecting dissent and letting people have their say. And he did a good job of not doing that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Green Step was probably a great example. I think our old public works director who was a nice guy, but without question had an agenda, and I think did push it.
Right.
Whether you want to agree or disagree with it, that's up to you. But I think everybody needs all the facts before they can make an informed recommendation.
Which is exactly what I was going to say. And that's not just from a commission standpoint. That's from a populist standpoint. And, this is where our old mayor, the former mayor of Crystal, she would just, the meetings are public. You can go. The meetings are public. You can go. That's great. But I don't have time with a family to go to council meetings, go to work sessions, go to planning commission meetings, charter commission meetings, environmental quality meetings, human rights commission meetings, parks and rec meetings. I would be a full-time meeting goer. So that's why having this stuff available, having good notes, having at least audio recordings on the internet of all of your meetings gives the transparency that regular people like Andrew and I and you who are listening to this podcast need in order to be able to make informed decisions, in order to be able to talk to your city council people when it moves from commission into the city council, and to begin that discussion long before the city council ever takes a vote.
Right. And I will say that there are some state statutes on this. If there is something to do with zoning, they have to give you notice a minimum of 10 days in advance. So, for example, if on a Monday the 20th, let's just say, the Planning Commission is taking up something in the Kavanaugh neighborhood, whoever is affected by that has to be noticed a minimum of 10 days in advance. And keep in mind, there's email, there's phone calls, there are other ways if you can't make it that Monday night. And that's for us to advise the council to do something.
But that's 10 days before a vote, and they've already been talking about it for possibly months beforehand.
Yeah, sometimes. They may not have a formal... One of my things that I would like to see is that if somebody has a formal request... to make it 30 days in particular, because let's say Milton's, I'll just use them, not that they did this, but let's say they come to the city and they agree, okay, we'll put it in front of, it's June, June 5th.
Yep.
Okay, we'll put it in front of the Planning Commission in July.
Yeah.
You get 30 days, in July, not the next one, which is next Monday, or 2 Mondays from now, or whatever. In July. Then it won't go in front of the council until August.
Right.
Not at the next meeting. Because I think it's like we used to meet on the second Monday.
Yeah.
And the council would sometimes they wouldn't, but sometimes they would take up an issue at their next meeting, which would be 2 weeks from that Tuesday, the meeting 2 weeks later, whatever that happened to be. Sometimes they would have an extra meeting in a month if there were 3 Tuesdays or something like that.
Right.
Or maybe we met the first Monday and they would take it up on the third Tuesday, which would be like 13 days later.
Okay.
But say, okay, no, we'll take it up in August. The world's not going to end if Milton's isn't open for 2 more weeks.
Right.
So I mean, I think there is that issue too, that... and sometimes, and another thing, too, is the people who get informed who don't live close enough for what the law requires, but may be affected anyway. Now, you live in that Kavanaugh neighborhood, you might not live right next to the park.
Right.
But the law only requires, I think, people who live within 300 feet to be notified about something.
All right.
Well, not everybody in that neighborhood does, but there's one way in and out of that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And you're affected whether you live 300 feet or 310 feet.
Right.
So there's that issue too. And so, or maybe one of the things that I'd like to see is you have the discussion one meeting, you take the vote the next meeting. So, for example, if we took a vote on that, we had the discussion in our June meeting, we voted on it in the July meeting. So we had more time to get feedback, which is another thing. And I have to admit, the council in Crystal's doing a better job of that. They're not just going and voting on something that minute the way the old council used to do. But there's 845 other cities in Minnesota, my guess is they're working to win.
Well, and
But
we
you're
know
right.
this.
You're
Yeah.
right. There is a disconnect, if you will, between meetings and decisions being made, and when people are informed, and people need to do their own research, and people
Right.
need to talk to their neighbors about it. And
Which is why cities need to make the information more available, because we don't have time to be professional meeting goers.
And it's true too that there are different rules governing a council meeting and an advisory board.
Right.
They're not necessarily the same.
No.
So that's another, but that's a state statute.
Yeah.
Of course, we could take it a step further if we wanted to. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly about the note taking, even though it's improved.
Yeah.
And when I was on the planning commission, we did have a city staff person who helped in that regard, helped our secretary. So it wasn't all on one person. And the city clerk is the official record keeper as well. But yeah, the changes and things like that are, it is, like, I'm with you. I love hearing the discussion, and I don't want to hear it the night they vote.
No, no, and this is the thing, and you're right. There are over 800 cities in Minnesota, and most of them are probably doing it backwards. In fact, remember when we looked through Hutchinson's comprehensive plan, and the last page, it shows here's how we make decisions in Hutchinson. It starts with city staff and advisory commissions and the council, and we talk about it and review it.
You
and
all
talk
get on the
about
same
it.
page.
You all get on the same page, and then we go to the public, and then we vote on it.
Well, here it is in a nutshell. This is going on at every level of government.
Yeah.
We get the plans, we agree on it, then we, quote, sell it to the public.
Right.
It's not, here, what do you think? I mean, the comprehensive plans were the same way.
Yeah.
Here's what we came up with. What do you think about what we came up with?
Yeah.
Then we're allowed to comment on it after the plans are
Yeah.
made.
It's like, well,
Why don't you ask us first?
Yeah. Exactly.
Got the same. I mean, look, the especially the unelected government has mastered the art of coming up with a plan first, getting all the important people on board, and then trying to push it on the public with maybe some minor changes. You might see some minor things but the fundamentals are always remaining. Not to mention commissions, Botno partnership.
Right.
But yeah, it's that is a problem. I think it's a problem that is going to require it's going to require a change in the people who work in government.
Right.
That is because they're the ones who work full time on this, and that's what they've always done. They've spent 20 years making the plans and selling them.
Right.
So
they get paid handsomely to do it.
They get paid very well
Yes.
to do it. Not that their jobs are easy and cushy. I'm not saying that.
No.
But yeah, their jobs are, and and the bigger problem is they're there to serve. They're not there to dictate, and that's an attitude change that is from the federal government, the APA, from everybody else, Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Yeah.
They all teach that. They teach at their workshops they're supposed to take the lead, not take the barometer of where you are and cater to that.
Well, and that's the problem, especially with local government. You have part-time you probably don't have volunteer other than advisory commission level, but at a city council level, you have part-time people. Sometimes even at county commissioner levels, you have part-time people. It's not their full-time job.
Even a state legislator, it's not their full-time job either.
No, it's not. So you have these full-time bureaucrats that sit in there and like, well, we're here. We've been here. We're going to be here after you leave. So it's up to us, because we know the city better than you, to be able to steer the ship. And so that's why we need to have separation of powers, I argue, and we need to have an elected official that's in charge of the executive branch, because without that, you have employees that are running the executive branch of the city, and they're able to steer the conversation that way rather than reporting directly to one executive that's responsible to the people.
And they're there regardless of who's on the council.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, like a city like Crystal, it is written in our charter that the only person the city council employs is the manager.
Yep.
So
That's it.
In other words, you want change, you have to direct the manager to do it. Of course, if they don't do it, it's a reason to get rid of them.
Right.
But it's not easy. City managers are kind of a club, if you will. It's not easy to become one. They have a minimum salary. You have to pay them. That's in state statute.
Yep.
So it's not as simple of a change. In fact, a city manager is something our charter requires.
Right.
So again, making those changes is not so simple. It's a discussion for another day. But you're right. The legislative and executive branches, how we think of them at a state or federal level, is not what goes on at a city level,
Right.
or a county level, or a school district level. And we should mention that school districts have financial accountability boards. They have
Curriculum boards.
They have the committee that they take to the legislature. I can't think of what that's called offhand. Legislative Action Coalition or something, I think. So if education is your passion, you know, education's a passion of mine, not exactly the system we have.
Right.
As a taxpayer and an employer, I take education very, very seriously, but I'm one that is not interested in protecting the system, so it makes it harder for me to serve in that capacity. But, you know, there's other ways, too, that are less than that to do that. So, yeah, I mean, and, you know, if you have questions, we can probably answer them. I mean, we can probably steer you to where you'd like to be. Don't hesitate to contact us and say, look, you know, there's an opening here. Should I take it? Should I apply for it? What should I say when I go in there? We can certainly coach you on that and get you on there, and then we have a foot in the door. You have a foot in the door.
Absolutely. You know, and that's the thing. How do you do this? I mean, we've known people that have served at city councils on advisory boards, have served at the pleasure of school boards on advisory boards, have served the county on advisory boards. And it's not that hard to do. You go down to City Hall, you go down to the school district headquarters, you go down to where your county offices are, and you say, I would like to apply for a board. You either can say specifically a board like your Parks and Rec board, or what openings do you have right now?
They should have those online, too.
Some of them do, some don't.
True. And like we said before, they're all made up a little differently.
Right. Check your city website, check your county website. They do at least list the commissions if they don't list vacancies.
Yeah. And you can, one other thing too, real quick, I would read the minutes and stuff of the previous 3, 4, 5 meetings.
It's not going to tell you much.
Yeah, but it'll tell you at least, you know, the subject matters and the approved minutes.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, minutes have to be approved at the next council meeting, which again is I don't want to say that that's a flaw, but it is kind of a flaw because to wait 30 days for approved minutes.
Right, and they should have unapproved right away.
They do.
Yeah.
They have, before, I know, I'll just use Crystal as another example. They put the agenda on the website the week before the meeting.
Right.
And if it's, but they, what was talked about, that won't be until the approved minutes, which would be the next meeting, depending on how often somebody meets. Like a city council can only approve meeting minutes at a council meeting. They can't do that. They can't take action at a work session.
Right.
So they may approve multiple things at a meeting. You may have had, especially during budget time, which would be second half of the summer, you may have 3 work sessions at a council meeting.
Right.
You may have 20 pages to approve. So it may be a lot. It may not be a lot.
Right.
So it varies, but usually the commissions, it's one meeting, you approve the meetings in the and they'll give you a packet. You read it over. I used to do it Sunday nights. I would read over the minutes. I would look at what we were talking about long before that.
Right.
Meetings I would go through, and you check for misspellings, you check for errors, you check for incomplete information as best you can remember. Sometimes you can't remember the previous month. It makes it hard, but that's usually the procedure.
Well, good. So going back to where we were, I mean, and so this makes it, I think, all easily well within your grasp to understand exactly what we do or what they do in commissions. You go down, you ask what's open, or you have in your head what you want to apply for. You ask, you fill out an application, turn in your application, and when they're interested in you, they will give you a call. You go down, you interview, and with a smaller committee, and then you'll usually have to go before the entire council, right, Andrew?
Yes.
In order to be able to be approved. So as long as you don't go into crazy land, and you kind of stick with just. You don't want to go overboard and show everybody your hand.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, sometimes it's routine. I don't want to say it. Yeah. I got hassled pretty good when I went in front of the
You did. You've got to be like Andrew, though, to get hassled. Yeah. I mean, really.
And I still got approved by a council that probably the majority didn't really like me very much. Mm-hmm. I was very honest. I couldn't hide my views. They all knew them. But the big thing that they asked me about was, you don't like a lot of things in our code and our, but are you going to carry out the law? I mean, you take an oath. You got to remember, you take an oath. Mm-hmm. And I said, absolutely. If I don't like laws, I'm going to work to change them. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to stick my finger in them. That's not how we have that's not a representative republic. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the councils want to meet you, which is a good thing. You should want to meet them. They want to, and I think it's also good for constituents to know who you are. You're the person serving their ward. They ought to know. If there's a planning issue or something, this guy lives 3 blocks from me. I can ask him.
Right.
I think it's beneficial to go and meet. And like I said, you will meet with the chair and maybe the liaison and the mayor. That's who I met with.
Yeah.
For me, I knew all 3 guys, so it wasn't. I knew Dick Van Ruden too. Not well, but I knew who he was. He had seen me at meetings before, and then I met with Jim and Casey, so it wasn't hard. The City Code Task Force, I met with everybody. I met with the whole council. Of course, all knew me, but they didn't know a lot of people who were applying, and so it was kind of a hey, what brought you to this? It's not a quiz. They're not out to get you.
No,
but they like to know the people who are serving and advising them on what to do.
Exactly. So just to reiterate, I mean, this is something that anybody in the community can do. And if you are thinking about running for any office anytime in the future, it's really a non-negotiable. You got to get your butt down there and you got to fill out an application and try to get on a commission. And if for some reason the commission you want is full, take a different one just to start getting some experience. After your 3-year term is up, you can always go to a different one, or maybe you're on the council by then and you get appointed to a different one. And it's just about getting out into the community and doing something. And in this case, you're doing something that pertains to governing, which is really important if you want to govern from an elected position at any time in the future.
Hear, hear.
So, anything else, Andrew, before I wrap this up?
No, I think we hit every note we could and gave some suggestions about getting those damn things on audio recording.
Absolutely. If you are in charge of that, you're listening to this podcast, make it happen. Don't make me come out there. So
I'll hold him back in the meantime.
All right, so we're going to wrap this up. This is another edition, and like Andrew said earlier, if you got questions, if you want to understand more of the process, you can always email us with 2 M's, comsolutionsmn@gmail.com. That's comsolutionsmn@gmail.com. Please do get a hold of us. That's why we're here, and we want to see Minnesota turn the corner and become something just to behold.
Out of this world.
Yes. So, on behalf of Andrew, I am Jason Bradley, and we will see you very soon with the next podcast. Take care.